The wind in the North Atlantic doesn't just blow, it bites. It carries the weight of the sea and the sting of ice, howling across the jagged coasts of Scandinavia like a hungry wolf. Imagine standing on a rocky shore 1,000 years ago, watching a long ship emerge from the grey mist. The men and women stepping off that boat aren't just tall, they look like they are carved from the very oak trees they used to build their vessels. Today we look at these ancient people through the safety of our glowing screens. We see actors with perfect hair and gym-honed muscles playing Vikings on TV. But the real Vikings didn't have personal trainers, protein powders, or air-conditioned gyms. This leads to a question that makes us look a little closer at our own lives. Were the Vikings actually stronger than us, or is it all just a legend? To find the answer, we have to look at how a Viking child grew up. In our world, a hard day might mean a long school day, or a lot of homework. For a Viking child, work started as soon as they could walk. There was no playtime that didn't involve building something useful. If the family needed a fence to keep the goats in, the children helped carry the stones. These weren't little pebbles, they were heavy, jagged rocks that required grip strength and back power. By the time a Viking reached adulthood, their body was a map of their labor. Think about their daily workout. To build a single house, a Viking man had to trek miles into a dense forest. He didn't have a chainsaw, he had a heavy iron axe that he had to swing over and over for hours until a massive pine tree crashed to the ground. Then he had to drag that tree, hundreds of pounds of wood, back to the village. This wasn't just cardio, this was heavy lifting, endurance and coordination, all wrapped into one. When they built their famous longships, they had to lift massive wooden beams and hammer iron rivets by hand. Every swing of the hammer and every pull of the saw added layers of dense, functional muscle. Unlike a modern bodybuilder who lifts weights to look good in a mirror, a Viking's muscles were built for one thing: survival. If you weren't strong, you didn't eat. If you weren't strong, your family stayed cold. We often hear that you are what you eat. If that's true, then Vikings were made of the toughest stuff on earth. Today, our kitchens are filled with soft bread, sugary snacks, and colorful boxes of cereal. We eat for comfort. Vikings ate for power. Imagine a Viking dinner table. There is no white sugar or processed flour. Instead, there is a large wooden bowl of stew made from elk or wild boar, animals that spent their lives running through the mountains, making their meat lean and packed with protein. Beside it sits a loaf of bread so dense and hard you almost have to fight it to take a bite. It's made of rye and barley, grains that grow in the cold and provide energy that lasts for 10 hours, not 10 minutes. They ate fatty fish like salmon and herring straight from the icy fjords. These fish are full of healthy fats that kept their brains sharp and their joints moving smoothly even in the freezing cold. They gathered wild berries that were bursting with vitamins and dug up root vegetables that had to survive the frozen soil. This diet didn't just make them buff, it made them resilient. Their bones were thick and their immune systems were like iron. They didn't have vitamins in a bottle. They had the mountain and the sea on their plate. One of the biggest differences between us and the Vikings is how we handle discomfort. If our house gets a little too chilly, we turn up the heat. If we get a tiny bit wet, we change our clothes. Vikings, however, lived in a world where comfortable didn't exist. The North was a land of ice. To the Vikings, the cold wasn't an enemy to be avoided, it was a teacher. We know from their stories that they practiced cold exposure long before it was a trend. They would jump into freezing rivers to wake up their spirits and harden their skin. This constant cold did something amazing to their bodies. It forced their hearts to work harder and their blood to flow faster. Imagine sailing across the ocean in an open boat. There is no roof. There are no heaters. You are soaked to the bone with salt water, and the wind is freezing the spray onto your beard. A Viking had to sit there and row for hours, even when his muscles were screaming and his toes were numb. That kind of physical toughness comes from a lifetime of never being too comfortable. Their bodies were adapted to the harshest environments on the planet, making them nearly impossible to break. When we think of Vikings, we think of warriors, but being a warrior wasn't just about being angry, it was about being disciplined. The most famous Viking formation was the shield wall. Picture this, 50 men standing in a line, their heavy wooden shields overlapping like the scales of a dragon. Each shield weighed about 15 pounds. Now imagine holding that shield up for 3 hours while someone on the other side is trying to hit you with a hammer. Your shoulders would burn, your legs would shake. Your breath would come in ragged gasps. To survive a shield wall, you needed more than just big arms. You needed a core of steel. You needed the leg strength to stand your ground when hundreds of pounds of pressure were pushing against you. This wasn't a quick sprint, it was a marathon of violence. This required a level of physical and mental endurance that is almost impossible to find in the modern world. They didn't just have the strength to hit hard, they had the strength to last. So if we put a modern champion athlete against an average Viking in a contest of strength, who would win? In a weightlifting room, the modern human might win. We have science on our side. We know exactly how many grams of protein to eat and exactly how to lift a barbell to grow a specific muscle. We are optimized. But if you took that same athlete and put them in the middle of a Norwegian forest in the year 900 AD, the Viking would win every time. The Viking had old strength. This is the strength that doesn't care about how big a muscle looks, it only cares about how long that muscle can work. The Viking could row longer, walk further, and endure more pain and cold than almost any human living today. Does this mean we are weak? Not exactly. We have developed a different kind of strength, the strength of the mind and the tool. We don't need to be able to lift a 200-pound log because we have the intelligence to build a crane that can lift 200 tons. We don't need to survive the freezing cold because we were smart enough to harness electricity to keep us warm. Our muscles are our computers, our medicine, and our global communication. We have the strength to heal diseases that would have wiped out an entire Viking village. We have the strength to fly to the moon, while the Vikings were proud to simply cross the ocean. The story of the Viking generation is a mirror held up to our own lives. It asks us, what have we lost by becoming comfortable? We might be smarter and safer, but the Vikings remind us that the human body is a magnificent machine capable of incredible things. They remind us that we were designed to move, to carry, to endure, and to face the wind. You don't have to pick up an axe or sail a long ship to find your inner Viking. You just have to stop looking for the easy way out. True strength, the kind the Vikings had, isn't found in a gym. It's found in the moments when you choose to do something hard instead of something easy. It's found when you keep going even when you're tired. So, were they stronger than us? Physically, probably. But the real Viking secret wasn't their muscles. It was their spirit. And that is a kind of strength that anyone in any century can choose to have.